Good morning. Good
Good
morning.
everybody. Good morning.
Okay, here we got a whole countdown, and I'm still in my phone like I just. Yeah. Anyways, thank you. Good morning. Welcome to Letting Go with Grace. I am your host, Dr. Tasha.
And I'm Coach Portia.
Morning, we are going to be talking about embracing change. And so before we hit play, Coach Portia, you were talking about having too many irons in the fire, and I think that's just a great place to start um,
Mhm.
as we're talking about embracing change.
Yes. I think all of us, well, it just goes down to like there's a lot of things that you want to do. So you have a lot of ideas that you want, and then you have life that you're doing. So I think sometimes we add to the irons that are in our fires. And I don't know, I think about from a business approach from what I do on a daily basis. It's like, how do we iron this out so that you're moving more methodically and making progress rather than stuck in way too many irons being in the fire and
Yeah.
not really doing much on any of them. So that's
Okay.
kind of what I was leaning towards when I made the statement. Too many irons in the fire. We might need to pull some of those out and figure out when those need to be interjected back in to make sure we're making progress.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So as I'm hearing you talk, the first thing comes to mind, like I'm of course I'm a why person. So, um, why? What is happening in our lives that we find ourselves with too many irons in the fire?
Mm. My first thought is that it's not always bad to have a lot of irons or things that you want to do. So it's not a horrible thing that there's things that you want to accomplish, things that you want to do, things that you're responsible for, because that's what makes you a reasonable and responsible adult. If you weren't, then you would just be sitting on the couch flying by the seat of your pants. So the fact that there is irons that need to be in the fire, and just to clarify, what is an iron? The iron could be anything. It can be the things that you want to accomplish, things that you want to do. Something down to, I want to clean out my garage and I want to clean out all the drawers in my house. To I want to study this subject, and I also want to start a podcast, and I want to write a book, and I want to do speeches, and I want to, you know, all kinds. I mean, these can all be irons. I want to participate in PTA at my kids' school, and I want to all of these I want to do's kind of compound themselves, and there's a bunch of stuff that you need to do, and after a while it gets overwhelming with all of the irons, and you don't have a real place to start. So
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson is one of my favorite speakers, and one of the things that he says is start with the thing that you actually will do, no matter how small it is, and do that. And it's almost like the compound thing where you have one win and you add an additional win and an additional win, and ultimately you end up actually accomplishing everything. But what he talks about is one of his concepts is start by cleaning your room, and it's very simple: clean your room. Um, but I think he's famous for that statement because it is that simple, but not always that easy.
Yeah.
And so the concept is to like sit on your bed, literally sit on your bed and look around in your room and make a decision about what you would do to redecorate your room or clean your room, depending on what type of person you are. Something that you actually will participate in, and do that. And when you get done with that, then sit down again. Okay, what else am I willing to do? And you do that. And what it does is it takes away the I don't know, the overthought of all these different things, and it moves it all the way down to these individual targets that ultimately accomplish this big goal.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. No, and I think for me, and I had an aha moment, um, and I've been watching people having to transition and change, and there has been uh, a lot of transitioning in my life, and so there's always something that happens in my life. I notice when it's time for me to change something. I get this feeling like it's almost like I wake up one day and I'm like, okay. this not it anymore. I don't. I remember being at jobs and being there and just having like this emptiness and being like, okay, this is almost like the grace has fell off the anointing for the appointment.
Mm, okay.
Um, and I'll be like, okay, yeah, there's something else. Um, in those moments, um, and what I realized yesterday, and I had to be honest with myself because I'm feeling that feeling in my life again. Like, okay, there's a new season, right?
Mm,
Like new oil for a new season. Um, One is scary, and so I had to just acknowledge the fear.
mm,
Um, I was driving. I drove to Paris yesterday to visit my cousin, who is also um, having to make some changes in her life. And so I was talking to her, and she was crying, and she was like, "I don't want to." And I said, "It's okay to be scared." I said, "It is scary." But as I was talking to her, like I'm like, "Yeah, Tasha, it's okay to be scared. It
mm-hmm.
is scary."
Right.
And I said, "But God did not give us the spirit of fear,
Right.
so we won't become fearful. We
Right.
can be afraid, but we won't become fearful so that it paralyzes us."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what I realized is that when I have too many irons in the fire, a couple of things are happening. Um, there's probably the anointing of the grace for the season has probably ran out, and I'm trying to do
Mm-hmm.
things to make the season fruitful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, one of my students, we were talking about change and just being authentic and genuine. And so we were just having this class discussion, and one of my students said, "Yeah, it's almost like why to come to therapy." She was like, "I found it was a he." He was like, "I found myself coming to therapy, um, but not being authentic and like just not being all the way honest with my therapist." And it was kind of like,
Walk
what
on.
what's the purpose?
Right.
And so another student gave an analogy, and she was like, "Yeah, it's like you hire cleaners." And you say, "Let me clean up my house before they get here because I really don't want them to see how messy it is."
Mm-hmm.
And then another student was like, "Yes, I get that, but that's not my situation." She said, "My situation would be like, I clean it up, but not because I don't want them to see how messy it is, but because there's some stuff that I don't want them to move.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things that probably need to come, and I'm not willing to let go of them."
Mm. Okay.
And, and so I feel like that is a part of bracing change. Um, with chosen, we talk about being a chosen individual, like you're chosen for the purpose, you're chosen, for that time. God has placed a purpose on your life, but we have to learn how to adapt and overcome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I'm learning in my life is part of adapting is twofold. One, acknowledging whatever feelings I'm having so that I'm able to grieve them,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm able to give them tears. I'm able to give them words because it belongs to something, right? My tears belong to something that I need to release.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then two, just kind of stopping and looking at what's happening in the atmosphere because I got a whole like situation happening over here, and I was looking at pictures from my weekend, and I was like, "Where did that fupa come from?" And I'm like, "That's it is all uncertainty. She is
Mm-hmm.
coming from the that is what you do when you uncertain. That's what
Mm-hmm.
happens when you uncertain. And so just noticing those behaviors as we are operating in coming into the knowledge that
Mm-hmm.
change is happening.
Okay. No, I definitely I'm really just sitting here thinking about some of the transitions and changes in my life and how simple the changes were, but not easy. Like being able to redefine myself post the divorce and come to the understanding that there were a lot of things about myself that I really didn't know, and I was so engulfed in what I was doing that I kind of let myself go. That's, I guess that's a term that they use. You let yourself go. Um, and I guess what I mean by letting myself go is that I was fully invested in my marriage and everybody that was included, my kids, my husband. And let me just say that's not a bad thing. Um, but and and I in the process of doing all that, I forgot to take care of me or even pay attention to me. I didn't know, coming out of my divorce, I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know what I didn't like. I didn't know where I wanted to go, where I didn't want to go. And then probably the biggest change was like, how do you define who you are now? Who are your friends? What environments are you in? What environments do you need to be out of? Who are you depending on now? Where do you need to go? Where do you need to be living? Like, on top of the grief of the separation of the divorce, it was kind of all of, again, these irons that were put in the fire to try to figure out.
Mhm.
And that process of change, like you said, there were some things that I tried to clean up so nobody would see them, um, mostly because I didn't want to see them, because I didn't believe that that's who I was. So, I'm like, I'm good. What do you mean? I'm fine. Because I was a doer and doing was what I did. So there were a lot of things that, yeah, I didn't want them to see and I didn't want them to move. So I was like doing both, coming out of my divorce. But that's what grief looks like. Grief is like this multifaceted, complex emotional state where you're not quite sure what your response is going to be. It could be one of many things at any given time. That's something I didn't understand either. So add that into all of the things that I needed to figure out, that I just said,
Right.
and change can be hard, right? When I put it all together like that, you like, girl, I'd have just laid down. That's what I'd have done. I'd have went to sleep because that sounded like a whole bunch of mess to figure out. I just went and got in my bed. And that was the easy thing to do, is just go lay down. Nobody's going to say anything to me about laying down. She needs to lay down. She's been through a lot. You get that sympathy. She's going through so much. We should let her lay down and go to sleep. But rather than doing that, because regardless of if I go to sleep or not, all of the things that need to change are still kind of right there before me. It was just taking off little layers at a time, like I said, that I could handle without trying to force myself to figure it all out
Mhm.
right now. And now let me just say this: me taking little steps that I could handle didn't start. I didn't start there. I started with, let's just clean all this up because I can see it, and I battled because I couldn't do it. I wanted to clean it all up, and for some reason I couldn't, because mostly because it was too much crap to go through, and I needed to do one layer at a time. So I fought that initially, and then realized I wasn't making any progress, which is what we was talking about with the irons in the fire, and
Mhm.
decided, I'm just gonna take one, and let me see if I can figure this out. Then I'll come back and I'll get the other one, and then I'll come, and then things started to get better for me. Like, how do I want to move? What do I want to know about myself? What emotions am I ready to address? Which ones am I not ready to address? Because the truth is, you can have emotions that you're not ready to address yet. Um, and then, okay, so these are not the ones I want to touch. Let's touch something else. And so I'm doing, and the change process was hard. But I think the main thing about the change process being difficult initially was the fact that I wanted to do it all at one time,
Mhm.
and I didn't want time to be a part of it. I was talking to my daughter last night, and we were talking about how long should a person wait after divorce before they get into another relationship. And because she made a comment about something being too soon, and I said, "What do you mean too soon?" I said, "Based on what concept, and who gets to decide what too soon or too?" She said, "Well, if something is about 5 years old, then people will say that's old." And then I said, oh, "Okay, 5 years." I said, "But you realize my age, right? Do you know how old I'm gonna be 5 years from now? Do I look like somebody who could, like, I ain't supposed to?" She's like, "No, that's not what I'm saying." I said, "You're right, because everybody's timing is different." but it's this concept of how quickly should I be moving, and how long should I be waiting, and how long should I be sitting on my hands, and what should I be doing. And I think that happens. And so I'm getting to a point where I think that happens when you're in a transition season or a change season. The first thing I know that I do, I don't know if you do this, Dr. Tasha, but I look out because this is unknown and foreign environment. I'm looking for people to give me guidance. I'm looking for, what do y'all think? What do you think is like the best way to handle the situation that I'm not familiar with? Um, and there's pros and cons to that. Like the reason why I say there's cons is because a lot of people are experts now. And so, you can get on TikTok and they'll tell you exactly what you need to do. Everybody may have a different strategy, or you can listen to some podcasts and same thing. You can go to your therapist or whoever. There's a lot of different concepts, and it's really one of those take what you like, leave the rest. The truth is, everybody does it different. But in the beginning stages of change, or initially going into the season that we're talking about, how do you navigate the unknown part of the change and ensuring that you have the resources that's going to support you through the change rather than you getting bogged down with so much information that you get stifled?
Yeah, no, I think it's a this and that. I don't think there is a. I really wish I could give you the blueprint or a, 1, 2, 3, 4, a
Mm,
navigating change. Now, I do say that as I'm operating in change, I can tell you there's probably a better way, good, better, best,
mm,
right? There's probably a healthier way. Let me say healthier way to navigate change. But I think you don't get to the healthy until you can just kind of sit and look at how possibly you're doing it in a way that is unhealthy, um, where you having those old coping behaviors, those the old mindset. Because I think that change is an opportunity.
it is.
Change
I
is an
like that.
opportunity to be able to see what needs to be left in the old season,
Hmm.
what coping behaviors, what mindsets, what what emotions are coming up, and what narrations. How are you narrating those emotions based off of old experiences? And so
Hmm.
I think change is an opportunity to become aware of those things. I would say personally, um, I'm I'm operating in the more acknowledging, right?
Hmm.
So I'm aware of what it looks like, but I'm having to acknowledge in real time what those things look like, what they represent, um, and then I'm having to do this, right? The release. I was listening to Tim Ross on the basement, and he was talking about two things that were really good. So he talked about making a moment a monument,
Hmm.
right? And so I think that's what happens in our transition of change, where there will be a moment we work for this moment. I work for, like I'm finally. God told me to leave my job 4 years ago, and I left it. And then He also was like, "All right, go back to school," and I did it. And then I got get to this moment. So I remember like even walking across stage, right? And I'm like, I did it. And then
Hmm.
as soon as I was on the other side of the stage, I was like, okay, now what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and in my head, I believe what happened as I'm acknowledging that I created this narrative that this is what this means.
Mm,
Getting the PhD, this is what it means. Um, and this moment in my life, this in out the hardest 4 years this of my life,
hmm.
um, I attempted to make a monument out of it. So I was trying to make it like this needs to be big and celebrated, and we need to look at it, and you know. And because I have my PhD, these things
Mhm.
should be happening next. Um, and so, what I'm learning to do in this moment is understand that it was just a moment. But
Mm.
what I'm learning about myself is how I cope with the changes, right? Because if I stay in the moment, I miss the next. And so it's the letting go of the perception of what I'm supposed to be. It's the needing someone to come in, praying and saying, God, what is next? But I've cleaned up my house because don't move my chairs. God, like you move everything else around. But as we change
Mhm.
things and change the seasons, don't move the chairs. And because Holy Spirit is it's such a gentleman saying, okay, I will if that's you don't want to move them, we won't move them. Right.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, there's chairs are representing something, and I'm trying to create another moment based off of that, or maybe the chairs are blocking something, and so I can't see what's behind. So there's something about those chairs that the me making them a monument that keeps me from being able to see the full opportunity. And so then I get overwhelmed. And then I get busy putting irons in the fire that don't even belong in the fire this season. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know about nobody else, but I'm just talking about me because of my background, because of I come from this line of women who a woman got to do what a woman got to do. So anytime something needs to be moved in my household or things are happening, my first thing is it's got to be this marriage. Like it's got to go.
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
It's got to be. It's got
It's
to
the
be.
man. It's him. He the
Got to
reason.
be. It's got to be him. And I've noticed that as well. Like I'd be like, yep, it's you. You got to go.
Right.
Uh, but what I'm realizing is that at all times in my life, right, I have to have my hands open. And so Tim did this illustration. And so he talked about, like, this is the thing, the gift, the opportunity, the season. And one, we have to have our hands open for him to drop it in it. Because sometimes he can't even get it to us because we thinking it needs to look another way and should be red, pink, or whatever. But it's almost like we have to stay in a posture of release or open hand, open hand.
Mhm.
Um, he'll drop it, and once he drops it, we'll hold on to it, right? Like, no, I'm a wife. You talked about, I'm a mother. I got this job. Oh, I got these opportunities. I'm a speaker. I'm a whatever's happening, right? My business made seven figures, and so I'm holding on, and the season is over, and God can't get us the next thing,
Mhm.
right? And now we've made this the monument. This is the idol, the money that comes with it, the prestige, the what it means to be in that role that comes with it. So we made this the monument, and God is like, no, that this season is over, and it's something else. Like there's another thing, another season, but I can't get it to you because you begin to idolize this thing. And
Mhm.
so there is a letting go of that um, because the season is over. The anointing, the oil for that is no longer flowing. And there's something else that we got to get to. So I hope that answered your question. But that
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I'm at.
I wanted to drop down to your analogy, but on a practical level, because I think that many times, like you see that analogy and it makes sense, but what the first question that comes to my mind, and I don't know if listeners have this first question, but it's like, how does that apply to my life? So, um, what is it that I could possibly be holding on to, and what is this concept of releasing my hands on a more practical level? Um, because you can say in your mind, I'm letting this go, You can believe in your mind, I'm going to keep it in your mind, that you have let it go. But there, your body is telling you something different. Your heart is telling you something different. Um, so to add to your analogy of, okay, first there's this awareness that I am holding on to this thing, right? And you got it in your hand. The layers of letting it go, because the analogy shows this, right? You just kind of do this. And I wonder for some people if it's more like this,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Where this is an awareness that I know I'm holding on to something, acknowledgement that I know I need to let go of something, right? And then, so now you're holding it with two fingers, right? And this may be head, heart, hands, right? So the first two fingers is your head. Hearts are usually harder to pry open, the head runs and the heart walks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like the hardest part of letting something go is getting to the point where your soul or your heart, your emotion center is also willing to let it go. And so you're aware that you need to let it go. You acknowledge that letting go is necessary. Okay. And now the prying of the last two fingers, which is mostly your emotions, to actually release it is what I typically see in my own life as the process.
Yeah,
So,
that's good.
because my mindset, I know I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm holding on to this way too tight. Like, I really need to start releasing this. And there's the awareness, and it's getting looser because I've made that connection. The heart is typically harder to get to move, right? And so I'll ask this question and put it on the table for all of us. When it gets to the matters of the heart, the head runs and the heart walks in the process of release, so that your hands can open for what's next. What steps can a person take? And of course, this is not a one size fits all. So this is not like this is exactly what you can go do. This is an example of a way that it can happen for an individual, and everybody's heart posture is different. Some people can willingly like use willpower to pry it open. The I don't really like willpower because it's typically a temporary fix.
Mm-hmm.
Willpower will release it, but willpower will not maintain the openness. At
Yeah.
some point, those fingers are going to curl back up because you didn't do the work to actually open them. But what are some practical things that an individual can do to start the process of removing the vice grip that is your heart center
Yeah.
from a thing that you've held on to, that, like you said, you've created a monument of.
Mm-hmm. Um, and so I'm just thinking personally. So like I've just done all of the coping things,
Hmm.
right? Like it is wrapping my mind around, even when I don't know exactly what needs to be let go of, right? Because it may be a person, it may be one in one season what was an opportunity that is no longer an opportunity. It may be a mindset,
Hmm.
um, but I've just watched myself behave
Okay.
with no judgment,
Okay.
right? And so just giving myself space. Like, and I'm like, yep, I'm numbing right now. I don't want to feel any of this. I don't know. Right. So I know something needs to be changed, but I don't know what needs to be changed. And so what I would typically do is just clean out everything, right?
Hmm.
Um, which is another coping behavior that I use. Right. So I'll go in and be like, I'm just gonna throw everything away, right? And I'll throw everything away.
Hmm. Hmm.
uh,
I do that.
this season I found myself um, doing the opposite of that. So the fight, flight, freeze, or you can put like freeze, fix it.
Hmm.
So there's some seasons where I will operate in the fix it. How do I fix it? How do I make it happen? Um, I think this season I am not in the fight, and so my fight is the doing and cleaning. I probably landed more in the flight where I am just kind of like, I don't want to be responsible for that.
Mm,
Whatever gonna numb the emotion. And so I think yesterday, being able to support my cousin through her change, what I realized is that I needed to feel.
mm,
I needed to tell myself how I was feeling. And it was, I'm scared.
mm. Okay.
I'm afraid. I'm so afraid. And then allowing, right, God's strength to be sufficient. And so I think there's a contentment that comes with just acknowledging.
Mhm.
Paul talks about in all things I've learned to be content, whether I have plenty or none at all. And I think that that works here, right? Whether I can figure it out or I don't have a clue. As I'm transitioning, there's this place of gratitude for the process. That's my contentment, where I can say I can't navigate the change. I'm not in control of the change of whatever's happening next. I'm not in control of that. So I can have a contentment that allows me to trust. So slowing down so I can feel it.
Mhm.
Gratitude for the feelings which we don't have a lot of.
Mm-mm.
Right? Because all I'm saying is like, what is this fear like? What information is it telling me? That I'm entering into a season that I don't have the knowledge. Like I don't have a blueprint for the season.
Right.
And that's scary. That
Mm.
is all fear is telling me.
Right.
Gratitude. Now I'm practicing gratitude. Um, and even just from yesterday, it has allowed me to slow my pace.
Mhm.
And so I'm not irons in the fire doing all the things. And I'm just saying, okay, let me just look at different areas of my life and just be diligent, just like you talked about. How can I be diligent in the one thing, right? With the podcasting, right? Like, let's just, if I'm a podcast, like, if I feel like this is what's happening in this season, how am I diligent about this?
Mhm.
Working with my clients, my business. What is the one thing that I can be diligent about? And it's just doing the last thing God told me to do.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Um. Those are great. That's exactly what I was looking for. Like, what am I to do in this process? Feel it. Have gratitude for it, and then in your doing. It's not this eradication of the emotions that you feel. I'm never feeling that again. Well, you are. It's still in you. Um, but it's not that. It's not the eradication because I am a complete eradicator. I just want to erase it.
Mm-hmm.
The experience that's associated with it, and you would think when I say I just want to erase it, that of course you can erase it. Oh yeah, I can. I can compartmentalize like nobody's business and convince myself that I'm no longer feeling that anymore. Now, what typically happens with that is as years progress, you see it seep its way out. But I've blocked out years of my life. I've lost years, literally, like mentally and emotionally. And I think of at least 5 years that I just, of course, what happened that year? I don't really know. Um, I don't remember what happened. And it's me compartmentalizing something in that season or during that time that may have hurt me. And my coping skill there is to compartmentalize. Oh, I don't have to focus on things I can't do anything about, so I'm gonna just move it out of my brain. But you lose all of this time and so many lessons when you choose to compartmentalize something and move it to the back of your brain. So it's
Yes.
doable. Um, so yeah, practically being able to feel it, see where it's coming from, what does this mean, and not shaming yourself about that, but then having gratitude for those emotions
Mm-hmm.
because they're telling you something. Like the last thing we want to do is be grateful for our emotions because they make us feel a way, whatever that way is. But when you realize that your emotions are actually alarming you and telling you information, and you see it as an information center, you're no longer angry with yourself because you're crying. You're now asking yourself, why am I crying? What does this mean? If you get angry, you're no longer mad at yourself for getting mad. You start asking yourself questions about why you're mad. I'll give you a prime example of this just yesterday. So, my son invited me to his baseball game. He sent me a text message, and I don't know how many seasons you've been watching, but me and my son's relationship is a little rocky because his all his life he's been with his dad, and that is kind of his first love. I know it's not common, and boys usually mama's the first love, but he is like completely dedicated to his father. That's who he lives with. And so um, he sent me a text message and he said, "Hey, mom, I got a game at 5." I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'll move some stuff around so we can come to your game." We went to the game, and I get out there. I get there early because I had to shift some stuff for work and getting my youngest from school and get out there. And I get out there. I'm like, we sitting there. Game haven't started. I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? 5:30. Game hasn't happened. So I reach out to my son and say, "Hey, what's going on with the game?" He doesn't respond. I reach out to my ex-husband and say, "Hey, I'm here at the game, but there's nobody here. Am I in the wrong location?" He was like, "Oh yeah, the time changed. They moved the game to 6:15." And I said, "Okay, well, what team is he on?" Like this is basic information, right? Oh, he's playing with JV this time, but he sometimes plays with varsity. So there's all this information that I don't have, and now I'm getting frustrated. And so I'm like, well, I've driven, 30, 45 minutes to this game. Going back home doesn't even make sense. So I guess me and my youngest will sit here until the game starts. So then I pick up the phone and call my son and I say, hey, he answers the phone. I said, I text you. I text you and I asked you what time the game started. You text me. You didn't text to tell me that the time changed. And now I'm saying, oh, I'm sorry, mom, I was busy. I was doing all this. I had all this stuff going on. I didn't have time. And I said, well, how long have you been knowing? Oh, they told us at about 3 o'clock today. I'm like, okay, okay. So I'm in my feelings. I'm in my feelings. Because in my mind, how your daddy know? You wasn't too busy to tell your daddy, but you was too busy to tell me. So now I've wasted my time when you made sure dad knew, but you didn't even tell. And you hear what I just said? This is what made me mad.
Mhm, mhm.
Here you go, putting him before me again. Like, why wouldn't you just tell me? It doesn't make sense. And I was literally in my feelings. I was upset. I had waited an hour and a half for this game to start. I'm just reeling on the inside. And it was just like, for a moment, just stop to say, what are these feelings? Like, why are you angry? What's making you so mad? And these are questions I'm asking myself. And I'm like, because I feel like he told his daddy he could have told me. And I'm having this conversation with me on the inside. Like, is it, are you sure that's what happened? I mean, yeah, they could have, but is there steps that you could have took to make sure? Is there something that you're not accepting in this environment that you're trying to change? Because what I know, primarily from what I've learned in Al-Anon, is like any irritation, frustration you have is you trying to control something that you don't have control over. And so my next question to myself was, what are you trying to control here?
Good
And it's
question.
really when I got down to it, I'm like, I'm trying to control his acknowledgement of who I am, and I'm putting a behavior every time he does something. My assumption is that he's honoring, devaluing me as his mother, and putting his dad on a pedestal. And because of that mindset, anything that happens, I just put it in that category. Oh, this is him dishonoring me again. He don't care about me. He just care about his dad. And so I was still upset. It took me a minute to really process through this conversation I'm having in my own head. It probably took me about 10 minutes to really go through it. And then there was just this moment where I said, has it ever been any different? Mm-mm. So who has the problem here? Is that you or them? Because you're not accepting these people for who they are. You trying to make them be who you want them to be. Like you want him to be considerate. So when he not considering, you get angry. But isn't that who he is? Like this is not like foreign behavior. So why
Yeah.
are you acting like it is? And it's not. when I say it's not foreign behavior, it's not the behavior of him putting his dad on a pedestal and dishonoring me. I'm talking about he's extremely dismissive. Like he's just the guy who gets the text message and don't respond to it. And it ain't just me that he does that to. He does that to a lot of people. Does he answer his dad quickly? Yes, he does. Because that has been the behavior, like the requirement between him and his dad. You don't pause. You do what you need to do for me now. But as it pertains to everyone else, that's kind of who he is. And so I'm in now saying to myself, what part of this can you control? And the part I can control is this part. Okay, well, if you know that he can be dismissive and that schedules change and they're not going to promptly come and tell you, why don't you check before you leave? So that rather than you getting here and getting angry, you know the information and then you can decide what you want to do from there. Because I still have a choice, right? But it was just that process of being able to acknowledge what I was feeling in that moment, categorize it based on what it actually was rather than what I wanted it to be. Because I could have went off. This was inconsiderate. I can't believe you didn't call me. Blah 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 blah. And that would have gotten me absolutely nowhere. Because I still would have been mad. But me being able to process through it gave me the ability to actually enjoy that game. So I was able to get over there, sit down, of course, you chill out, watch the game, and actually have conversations with people and laughter and all of this great stuff because I was able to walk through that process and then get back in my car and show gratitude for the process. Like there's gratitude for that process
Yeah,
because I
no,
could have definitely been in my if it had been the past, I probably would have been crying. I probably wouldn't have watched that game. I probably would have just went home. Here he is. I'd have been in my bed for another 3 days because here we go again. He don't care nothing about me. And those are the moments where you can kind of see the progress that that's real time where you can see progress happening.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah,
But
this,
yeah, so that's an experience I just had yesterday. And it's like once you're aware of something and you know, I think the point that I was trying to make is when you know, you know. And so I was thinking about an analogy of like we're talking about the living room and the chairs. And there was a time where those chairs were sitting there and you didn't even pay attention to it. And all of a sudden you go into that living room, you're like, that chair is a little close to the door. It ain't never bothered you before, but all of a sudden you see that it's close to your door. And you're like, I don't know if I want that chair right there. And then you start going and then all of a sudden you tripping over the chair. You ain't never tripped over the chair before, but here you are tripping over the chair. You're like, why am I tripping over this chair? It's too close to the door. It's too
mhm,
close to the door. I really need to move this chair. You haven't moved it yet. But then all of a sudden, now that you know it's there, it's in the room, if you're aware of how close it is to the door, you now you've had an experience where you've tripped over that chair and stumped your toe. And you're like, I just need to change, I just need to move that chair.
mhm,
And then you
mhm.
start thinking, where am I gonna move this chair to? Because I got this whole living room set. Do I need to just move it to the other side of the room? Do I need to get rid of it? Is it crowded in here? And all of a sudden you start all of this stuff like becomes you can see it. Things that you could never see before, you now see. And then you can make decisions like, I think that chair's too close to the door. So you can choose to move that chair to another side of the room, or you can say, I don't even really need this chair. Why do I even have it in here? And you go and get rid of your chair. And that's what slow progression of change kind of looks like, you
Yeah,
know. And once you
absolutely.
know, you can't unknow.
No,
So
absolutely. Yeah. May I challenge you?
yes.
Um, because I'm hearing, and so just one, thank you for your vulnerability and sharing this story with us. Um, and I think that that is like a great example of what the change and embracing it looks like. And so I'm hearing you go through it. But I want to challenge you because we talked about head and heart. So I
Mm-hmm.
want to challenge you on a heart level because I'm hearing that there's a trigger in your story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely true.
Um, and so as I challenge you, just also challenging our listeners and challenging myself, because I'm hearing something in your heart that you have not grieved.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time the story shows up that way, it triggers that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is an acknowledgement, the doing, right? There's an awareness that this is feeling frustration. You're walking it through from a knowledge, from a head level. But I'm wondering, and I just, if you said I could challenge you, wanting to challenge you on grieving not being your son's first love, giving that to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because once you can grieve it, you can heal it.
Mm.
What is healed cannot be triggered, or is triggered less, maybe. Let's say it that way.
That's really good. Yeah, that's really good. I don't think that I have. You're right. I don't. I've tried to rush to acceptance step when it comes to that trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll just accept the fact that this is just the way it is. I've tried to um, rationalize why it is. Well, when he was little, I was working and I wasn't at home, and so he clung to his dad because I wasn't there, and so I didn't get the time that I wish I would have with him like I did my other two, and that's the reason. I've rationalized it. I've tried to accept it and just be like, okay, this is what it is. I've actually had anger as it relates to it. Um, I don't know if I've just sat in it.
Yeah,
I don't think I have.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And just allowing your heart, giving it tears, because I mean, like allowing the tears to release the connection to what was missed, what
Mhm.
happened,
Yeah.
what your heart hoped for. And
Mhm.
it's the hardest part about embracing change. When we talk about head and heart,
Mhm.
for us to go ahead, I'll say it's me. It's easy for me to go ahead. It's
Oh,
easy
it's
for
easy for
me
me
to go
too. Yeah.
ahead. But the heart stuff,
Mhm.
because the heart stuff is we're having to acknowledge that what I thought was going to be, what was supposed to be, the meaning that I gave this, what
Mhm.
society says it should be, is not.
Mhm.
And allowing ourselves to grieve that
Yeah.
is. And I think once we can grieve it, just back to that chair analogy, because even if we move the chair, but what has that chair represented? Right? Maybe it being by the door when you first put it there, it was like safety, right? If somebody
Mhm.
comes, please, maybe it was what, the, but grieving that, and I think that that is the part of embracing change. And so I'm thinking about my cousin, um, and I think that at the end, and God is so good. She was excited. We got there. Just in her transition, she's having to do some short term transitioning. Um, it was a woman there that she knew, and so there was some. She was familiar with the lady, and it gave her a sense of trust,
Mm.
right? And I just saw her face like just change, and she kind of lit up, and she kind of was like, well, maybe I can do it. And I'm like, yeah, I think you can. I think you can do it. And she,
Mhm.
and I'm like, it's still scary, but yeah, but I think you can do it. And she was like, yeah, okay, okay. And so I think that that is where I'm also landing, right? The trust. Like I've seen God do this time and time and time again in my life.
So true.
Like we've come to another opportunity, right? It's time to release the season and walk into the next season, whatever that looks like.
Mhm.
And I've seen him do it time and time and time and time again. I've seen him provide for me season after season after season. I've seen him do the supernatural
Mhm.
over and over. Um, and there are times where I'm saying, like, I'm having to operate in faith, right? Because we talk about faith and trust being two different things.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so the faith is not knowing. I'm operating in faith in the season when I can absolutely choose to trust
Oh
because
yeah. Mhm.
been predictable. You've been
Mhm.
reliable. And I can utilize my faith. And I heard Tim say this. I can utilize my faith in another area, my faith for somebody else, right? The
Mhm.
unknown. I can utilize that in another area or space for someone else. And I can just choose to trust because you got a track record in my life.
Mhm. Yeah, that's yeah. It made me think of the old church, the grandmothers, the mothers. I've seen you do it time and time again. When they were in their moments of despair, they reminded themselves of how many times God came through, and that's what help them through those really tough moments. Now, they didn't have the words or the process to heal their pain at the level that we're talking about, but they definitely had the strategies to keep going when it got hard. And one of those strategies was to remind yourself of what God had already done, and you don't have a reason to doubt Him. What they say, I have no reason to doubt Him. I know too much about Him. That those are some of the little quotes, or they would throw out there, and they're like, I've seen them do it time and time again. They remind themselves of the many times that God showed up for them, and that is what got them over that hump, whatever that hump was, so that they can continue to move on with their lives. So for sure, just a reminder. And I like that. I like the fact that you don't have to always lean on faith, that after you've had a relationship with God for a time, trust is where you lean heavily, and He tells you to trust you. Trust me, to over and over and over again in the Bible. I don't even know how many times He says it, but trust me, trust me, trust me. Have I not shown you? You know, I've been consistent. I'm the same one that I'm the same today, yesterday, and forever. Um, Even in all the complexities of life, God never changes. So I like the idea that I can lean in on the trust that I have because of our experience, and use faith for other things. Like, I don't think I've ever heard it said that way before.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but that God definitely has brought me through a lot. And I think that's where the word gratitude comes from. Like, He told me gratitude for this year. And I think that's where the gratitude comes from. We hear everybody talk about gratitude, just be grateful, just be grateful. Aimlessly being grateful, but I think what it does when you actually use it the way that it was designed to be used is it is those reminders of who God has been and how thankful and grateful you should be as a result of what He's accomplished in your life. And so, and it reminds you that you're not your own God and that you actually need Him. Because if you look back over your life, it wasn't anything that you did. It was always Him. He
Yes.
always showed up, for sure.
Yes. No, absolutely. And so as we wrap up,
Hmm.
I want to hold space for you. And so I'm challenging you to grieve.
Hmm.
Grieve supposed to be, and I'm putting it in air quotes for those society expectations.
Right.
Um, Acknowledge um, what you wanted it to be so that you can be content with what is.
Mm, I like that.
Um,
Okay.
and so I think that is for everyone. Feel it, right? Just we're in the awareness. We are becoming aware. There's a lot of things that we know, um, but trust takes letting go,
Hmm.
right? And to let go, we have to be aware of what we're holding on to.
Yes.
And so I am, whoever this is speaking to today, I want to also challenge you to grieve. Grieve what you wanted it to be. Grieve
Mm,
what it's supposed to be. Grieve the societal expectations that you took on and create in that you took on to create a narrative of whatever it is in your life.
right.
And just allow yourself to be honest about what that is. And I think you'll be able to do that by being aware of your emotions and allowing your emotions to inform you
Mm,
what it is you need to grieve. And give it tears
give it tears.
and allow yourself to grieve, um, and embrace that we are right where we need to be. Right? We are right on time.
Yes, we are.
And whatever our next is going to get to us if we let go.
So, are you ready to let go?
Thank you for coming to Letting Go, episode 5, season 2.
Oh.